You got
Here
me
we are.
up. You got me up 7 in the morning.
Yes,
I
I
got
know.
my coffee.
He's got his coffee. So it's guys, it's 9 p.m. in Australia. It's 7 a.m. in America. So we're very, very fortunate to have Mr. Billy Fajardo, the director of the World Salsa Summit from America, joining us. He very graciously agreed to get up early in the morning to join me to have a chat about dancing stuff that's going on in the world at the moment and the things that have happened in the past. He's got so much experience and knowledge when it comes to dance and competitions and music and sort of everything that everyone's really passionate about. So I'm very honored to have him give us our time, his time. And yeah, if you have any questions, you're welcome to put your questions in the comments section, and then we can go through them as we go. But I wanted to speak to you a lot about your competition, because you've been running the summit now for how many years?
8. It's going
8
on
years
8.
at the summit.
Hopefully
Yeah.
we'll have it.
Fingers crossed for next year.
Yeah, yeah.
When was the first World Championships held, like, for salsa? Like, not like a ballroom competition or something, but when was the first one held?
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, Ballroom tried to do World Championships through the IDO, the International Dance Association, back in the late 90s, like 99 on. They actually held it here in Miami at a ballroom event, and they had invited a lot of people. So that was like the first time, but it wasn't the salsa scene. They had some couples from the salsa scene, but then they had some people from ballroom scene from all over Europe, because they mostly come from Europe, the IDO. It doesn't come from the United States. People considered the Mayan, it's a club in LA, as determining who's the best salsero at the time. But New Yorkers were never there, and nobody else was never there. You know, Johnny Vasquez was there, and several other people were there. But that was like the first time that competition first took grip in the community in a big way, because we always had competitions. Don't get me wrong. You see, I'm trying to give you a little bit of history why. Of course,
I appreciate it.
If you want to go, you know, and say, okay, when was the first official one? You could say that because of the span, in other words, how many people it gathered, I would have to say ESPN. But prior to ESPN, because ESPN was like 2005 or 6 or something, you had Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico, the reason why I didn't consider it a world championship, even though the dancers considered it a very credible competition to win, right? The reason why they call it, because it didn't have representation of the entire world. You kind of have to have, for it to be a legitimate world championship, in my opinion, you got to have, I mean, there's 200 and something countries. You know, and if you look at the map, you ever counted how many countries there are? There's like 200 something countries. So for someone to have 10 countries, is that representation of a world championship? No. If it's somewhere around 35 and up, you know, then you're talking. So the ESPN had about 43, 44, 45 countries. That's pretty large, right? Puerto Rico didn't have that, even though it was a really hard competition to win. You know, you go there, you do your showcase first, then you have to do this live improv, you know, live music. And that's a really hard thing to do, especially when you're asked to do all these tricks, tips, and drops and all this nonsense, right? But then, you know, there was another competition I held, me personally I held. It was called the International Hustler and Salsa. And that goes back to 98. And that was called the International Salsa Championship. Again, not a world championship. It doesn't have representation. So I would have to go with the first one, in my opinion, would be ESPN. That's when, you know, the Salsa 7, I call them, because, you know, it was 7 people that invested. And the front man was Albert Torres. And because he had already been going around the world to different congresses and everything, it was easy for him to kind of like put the stamp on his chest and take it everywhere around the world. And that's how we got the whole thing about qualifying. Right. You know, qualifying from different countries. The thing is, you know, I always had an issue with qualifying for an event. Yeah. Because I don't think it fully represents the best in the world. you can get a country that doesn't have that maybe the best dancer didn't get an opportunity to dance or something. Then you get someone that's not as good, but it represents that country, and that's not really getting the best. When, for whatever political reasons, financial reasons, or whatever reason might be, someone pissed somebody off. Who knows? You know what I'm saying? What happens? But I would say ESPN in Las Vegas. That would be it.
In 2005.
Yeah, I think it was 2005, 2006. I try not to remember the past too much, but then it reminds me how old I am. So I try not to think. I try not to think about it too much. But yes, it was there.
So since that competition around 2005, like the changes in the scene from then have been huge, like huge changes. Yeah. And even the competitions have changed a lot as well, because I know at some competitions you need to display, or in the past you had to display elements of freestyle dancing just to be able to do your showcase, right?
Yeah, we tried that. We did state that in the rules, but I don't remember ever implementing it. I think it fell by the wayside because we found ourselves with like 300 couples. We found ourselves with so many people in Las Vegas that the issue wasn't, we had no time because you had TV involved. So we had no time to go through, the preliminary rounds in a heated format and then go do your showcase. I think what happened was that we ended up doing showcases. It was in the rules and a lot of confusion, but a lot of couples came over and they were asking, are we going to do this? I said, no. On the local level, they were doing it. But I said, here, we can't do it. After analyzing the situation, we sat down, had a meeting. I don't think we'll be there all day. I mean, we were there all day anyway. You know what I mean? But we would have been, forget about it. It was just ridiculous. And then we had to do the on-site qualifying, meaning people had to come from wherever they came because they didn't qualify, and then they'll dance there. Which I found, to be truthful with you, a bit of a sham because everybody that came made it. So it was like, okay, who are we going to eliminate? And nobody, and Salsa 7 didn't want to eliminate anyone because they spent so much money to get there. And I said, but this is a competition. People lose.
Yeah.
I mean, by not letting them lose, what are you teaching them? What are you giving them? The whole point is to raise the level of dance to the point where you're going to get the best in the world, and you elevate the dance itself. I mean, the community didn't even know the terminology in terms of competition. Like if I was like, we were doing descriptions in our rules and regs, well, trick steps and drops and flares, and then everybody's saying, "What's a flare?" And it was, they didn't know what a flare was. And then they didn't know what combined tricks are and how long you could last. And it was very descriptive, but I found out really quick that nobody knew. And it's not their fault that they didn't know. Yeah. I just assumed, which was my problem, that they would know, or they would research, or they would go out and get someone to teach them. But there are many places that don't have access to the type of professionals. They might even have that information, right? Yeah, so I find myself in the ballroom the first night, the first day, literally looking at every routine, critiquing it and telling them, you have too many tricks. You're doing this, you're doing that, you're doing this, you're doing that, right? And I sat there for 9.5 hours going through as many competitors as I can. And that was the beginning of the process of educating the competitors' environment in the salsa scene.
Wow.
It's taken us a while, right? Now you mentioned that the level has jumped. Yeah, because once talented people or talented dancers get a grip of what it is, and they really learn how to train, they really learn the process of competing at a high level, you're going to get that jump. You're going to get it. And we got it. I mean, the first few competitions that I saw were terrible. Choreographic. No, I mean, I don't want to. I mean,
I know what you mean.
I'm kind of like brutally honest sometimes, and sometimes I catch myself and say, you got to be careful. You can't, people are going to be upset with you. But I just think that, at the time we were all learning and the community wasn't ready yet. I think they are now. I think the salsa and bachata scene has clearly established that they have a presence in this community.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, in my opinion, I think the best acts in Congresses today are all competitors. You get very, very little percentage of the people that are closing at Congresses that isn't a competitor or hasn't won something or isn't a champion at it. You understand? I rarely see that. Rarely see it anymore. And that shows you the level they're on. Look, the investment has to be in the actual act of executing the competition.
Yeah.
Forget the promotion. You know, a lot of promoters spend a lot of money on promoting it, getting people that no. If you build the competition that's consistent, that has, you know, of course we all have problems, right? But you try to minimize those problems, right? And therefore, and the one thing that we have to be clear about, transparency has to be there. Yep. Always. You understand? So when you're showcasing these judges and you're showcasing the scoring that's done right there, and then the paper goes from here to there, and everyone sees it, there's a sense of, wait a second, this is fair. And then, you know, you keep executing that every year and you build the confidence of a clientele. They're going to tell other people. I always bet on the integrity of the competition and try to get the best judges possible.